Good evening. On behalf of the ABU Education Fund and ACLU of Utah's Campaign for Smart Justice, I want to welcome you to the 2018 Salt Lake County District Attorney debate. The District Attorney is a powerful actor in the criminal justice system. As the county's top prosecutor, the District Attorney is also legal counsel for the county on civil matters. We are fortunate to have both candidates here tonight to discuss their visions for the Salt Lake County District Attorney's Office. We thank the candidates, Mr. Sim Gill and Mr. Nathan Evershed, for participating in tonight's debate. We're looking forward to a lively discussion on a wide range of topics. We also thank the S.J. Quinney College of Law for hosting the debate tonight. As you can see, we needed the space. It's a full house. And we also want to, of course, thank you, the audience, for being here tonight, for showing your support for democracy and taking time to learn more about the candidates on the ballot this November. To show respect for the two candidates and to make sure that everyone can hear the debate, I just want to go over some ground rules for the audience. So first, no signs in the room. Of course, we want to make sure that everybody can see and hear the debate without an issue. Second, you are welcome to clap if you like an answer, but please wait until the candidates are finished speaking. And third, everyone will have a chance to meet the candidates after the debate. So as you walked in, you probably noticed that there's some tables set up outside. There'll be refreshments after the debate, so please stick around and join us in those. And so if we can all agree on those ground rules, we will have an excellent debate ahead of us tonight. So now I'm going to hand the reins over to tonight's moderator, Mr. Steve Urquhart.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. What a spectacular turnout. This is exciting. Two fantastic candidates. Glad that they could be here with us tonight because the debate is about them, not me. Let's get started. We will first have the candidates' introductions, and the order for that will be Sim Gill, and then we will hear from Nathan Evershed.
Good evening. Yes. I'm sorry? Oh, I thought.
If you want.
Oh,
if you want, you can come up.
Okay.
Whatever your preference is.
Okay. I'll do it from here. Good evening. Thank you to the Alliance for a Better Utah, ACLU, the University of Utah Law School, and Steve for hosting this conversation. Thank you, Nathan, for participating. Thank you, Jamie and my family, for your patience through a campaign season. And finally, thank you to all of you who came here tonight, because I know you care about our community and the political process and the issues. My name is Sim Gill. I am your district attorney, and it has been my privilege to be your district attorney. The role of the prosecutor has evolved and continues to evolve. The role of the prosecutor is no longer defined by merely going to court, understood in wins and losses, and getting convictions. The challenges are far more complex, the impact far more profound, the expectations far more demanding from our community, and rightfully so. Mass incarceration, drug addiction, the use of force, the intersection of homelessness and poverty with criminal justice, mental illness, untested rape kits, bail reform, the neurobiology of trauma are just some of the issues that confront and challenge criminal justice today. Public trust, integrity, fairness, equality, proportionality in punishment are just some of the expectations and promises we embrace as our duty, not merely in words, but in actions that our citizens rightfully demand. As prosecutors, we must advocate for our communities, a sense of fairness and accountability. We must balance budgets and scarce resources. I have done that. My opponent has not. We must be authors of innovations and creative solutions to historical challenges and systemic failures. I have done that. My opponent has not. We must engage our community, inform them, give them access to their institutions from which they feel disconnected, even when it is difficult and uncomfortable. I've done this. My opponent has not. We must pursue our independence to be the checks and balances against other institutions and interests that would victimize our citizens and communities. I've done this. My opponent has not. We must be personally accountable, not hiding behind the cover of our institutions, but embracing the controversial for our community and making decisions in an open, transparent way, even if they are not personally advantaged. Because it's the right thing to do. We must honor the due process of offenders to ensure the integrity of our power while advocating compassionately for the hurt and trauma of our victims. Our leadership demands that we lean into these challenges, embrace the difficult, because this is both our duty and responsibility. We have to pursue data and research to inform our decisions, not our emotion or privilege of power. We must forge new collaborations, new policy partners, and have the courage to make decisions and sacrifices not for the short-term gains, but to solve long-term problems and injustices. I've been a public prosecutor for 23 years. I prosecuted in Layton City, Salt Lake City with the Salt Lake County DA's office with the arson fraud unit. I prosecuted cases involving sexual exploitation for profit cases, white-collar crime, environmental crime, and general felonies, before being appointed as the lead in the largest municipal prosecutor's office for 10 years. I left the city when I was elected to lead the largest district attorney's office when I came here. Throughout my professional life, I've advocated for therapeutic justice and criminal justice reform. I helped start the first mental health court in the state, the first family justice center in partnership with the YWCA that wraps services around victims of domestic violence. I led the way to bring the Children's Justice Center to be a part of the DA's office so they could be economically secure and continue to help serve more than 1,500 children a year. Most recently, I helped start the Veterans Court that has been nationally recognized. I have managed more than $250 million in budgets, being fiscally conservative and always remembering it's your money. I ran for this office to serve my community, to take on historical challenges and deficits, to balance public safety with therapeutic justice, to give access and voice to our community in a changing world. I look forward tonight to discussing the big ideas, the institution challenges, the political and policy silences that have contributed to the failures in our criminal justice system, and also which will serve as the answers to our future actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sim Gill. We will now hear the opening statement of Nathan Evershed. Up here or there, whatever your preference is.
Thank you all for being here tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you all. My name is Nathan Evershed, and I'm running for Salt Lake County District Attorney. I am running because the District Attorney's Office is, as it stands now, broken. And I believe that I am qualified and prepared to fix it. In recent years, our office has lost so much. We have lost skilled and experienced attorneys and staff. The public's trust in our office has eroded, and the office has lost the respect of law enforcement, our key partners in keeping this community safe. That is why it is time for a change. But first, a little background. I met my wife while we both worked at the old spaghetti factory in Trolley Square. We've now been married for 17 years, and we are raising 4 growing and busy boys. Sometime after we were married, we made the decision that I would go to law school, to become an estate planning attorney, to work on people's wills and trusts. But it's funny how fate gets in the way. During my first year, I got a job as a clerk in a county attorney's office. With that job, I was able to actually work on cases and see the positive impact that we could have on victims and on our community. I loved everything about that job. I found my passion. So my plans changed from wills and trusts to public service. And after law school, I eventually got a job, a dream job, with the district attorney's office. For nearly 11 years, I have had the privilege of doing a job that I love, of serving and protecting a community that I love, and being a voice for victims. That is why I became a prosecutor. Now, I can tell you that I did not become a prosecutor to run for public office. But that need has arisen out of concern and necessity. It is important to me that I have the solid majority of support of my coworkers, all county law enforcement associations, defense attorneys who are here, retired judges, fellow prosecutors inside the county and outside. But let me tell you about the great colleagues I have inside the district attorney's office. They have spoken to me of pervasive politics within the organization. Many experienced prosecutors have come up to me and have said that while they plan to stay with our office for many years to come, that it is time for them to look elsewhere and leave because of a hostile workplace. We have lost some of our best. These are talented, skilled, experienced people. There has been a serious talent drain. In fact, more than 25% of our office has left in the last 2 years. Losing 1 out of 4 skilled employees imposes a huge cost, both to the taxpayer and to the experience level and trust of our office. These good people have left because of a toxic culture within the office, and I am running to change that culture. Politics, even inside the office, has ruled. That is why we say justice, not politics. But politics isn't just a problem inside the office. Sadly, many people are convinced that politics has driven too much of what is done outside as well. You'll recall the high-profile, headline-grabbing prosecutions. One was against a police officer, and a couple against the former attorneys general. Some have come up to me personally in my events and have expressed the concern about the timing of these charges, which were all in the run-up to an election. We all saw the charges, we all saw the headlines, and we all saw my opponent's re-election. But you know what we didn't see? Not a single conviction from all those headlines. And you know what we're seeing now? Lawsuits. This has created the perception of political prosecutions. And that perception alone has a huge impact on the public's trust of this office, saying nothing of the cost to the taxpayer. Not only that, but law enforcement has lost confidence in this office, largely because of politics. I have their endorsement because they know me. They know that I'm a career prosecutor and not a career politician. They know that a healthy relationship between law enforcement and prosecutors is essential for the public safety. They, along with so many others inside the criminal justice system, including defense attorneys and other prosecutors, trust me to make every decision based on justice, not politics, and I will deliver. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan Evershed. We now will move on to the questions and answers, and the format is, I will ask a question, and one candidate will have 2 minutes to address it, then the other candidate will have 2 minutes to address it, and then in that same order, they each will have a minute to respond to what the other candidate said. So with that, let's get started. We will start with Sim Gill, and the first question is, what is the role of the district attorney?
Thank you, Steve. The role of the district attorney, as I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks, is evolving. It is complex. It is all-encompassing. It's no longer about simply going to court. It's about the broader issues that confront us in the criminal justice system. It is about making sure that you have a vision to address some of these historical wrongs. It's about the idea of serving your community. Public safety is an important part of it. But what do we do with the mass incarceration? What do we do with people who are coming in and the conditions why they're coming in? What do we do once we prosecute them, but how do we transition them out of the criminal justice system? It's about advocating for those who don't have a voice. It's about making sure that our community understands that their issues and concerns will be addressed in a fair and just manner. It's about balancing budgets. It's about making sure that you have the resources available to do our job. It's about having collaborations about going forward with systemic improvements. It's about mental illness. It's about issues that confront us in regards to homelessness and the transitions that we're going to make for these individuals out of the criminal justice system. So the role has evolved. It is no longer about just simply going to court. That is an important part. It is a huge part of how people are getting in there and how people are leaving out. It is the complexity of all those things. That's how the role what the role is.
Thank you, Sim. Nathan Evershed, what is the role of the district attorney?
Well, my opponent last week was at a conference, and he actually answered that exact question. And part of that answer was, well, you have to be fiscally responsible, and you need to have collaborative partnerships with your partners. And I agree that that's part of it. Unfortunately, we haven't been seeing a lot of fiscal responsibility. Originally, what our district attorney's office budget was at $23 million. It's now ballooned 61% to about $36 million. When it comes to people that are top leaders inside of the office, they make a combined salary of about over $1.5 million, and none of them go to trial. And I think that is an issue when you talk about fiscal responsibility as well. So I'm different. I believe that the district attorney should lead from the front, should have a management that is not only just focused inside the boardroom, but it's also in the courtroom as well. And I believe in partnerships. As a matter of fact, when my opponent first became the district attorney, he received the endorsement of all law enforcement associations. But at this time, he doesn't have that. Right now, we are the only county attorney's office along the Wasatch Front that does not have a good relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is our federal partners. Right now, there are 200 cases filed by Project Safe Neighborhood in the last year. Not one of them came from our office or from Salt Lake City as well. What I plan to do is build on those relationships, have a good relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office, have a good relationship with our partners in law enforcement, and have a good relationship with others inside the criminal justice system.
If I may respond.
You both automatically get a 1-minute response.
Well, when we talk about fiscal responsibility, let's understand one thing. My administration has returned almost $5.8 million back to the taxpayers during my administration's time there. The increases that have occurred have been structural increases that have occurred also because of salaries and benefits. So would you want to deny the salaries and benefits to our employees? That we have had FTEs that have come on, but those have also been consistent with, in a very conservative way, for the number of case increases that we've had. And so, I think that, when we look at being fiscally conservative, we've let out on building a building that is going to save $13.1 million to our taxpayers through the life of the bond. Over the same 25 years, we positioned our office to actually increase about $19 million in new revenue. When you talk about the full fiscal time, we've also returned, we've almost had almost $20 million in new revenue at the same time.
Thank you, Sim. Nathan.
When it comes to our building, more than $325,000 were spent on an art piece that looks like a giraffe on the outside of it. And here we are, we have friends inside the public defender's office that can't get into a new office space. In fact, they take our old furniture. And is that the best allocation of our fiscal responsibility? Secondly, we have had a massive turnover. That is a huge cost to the taxpayer. I don't think that is also fiscally responsible.
The next question, Nathan will go first on this one. What makes a good district attorney?
I believe what makes a good district attorney is a district attorney that's respected, that's trusted by his colleagues within the office and outside the office as well in the criminal justice system. Someone that has courtroom experience, so that district attorney can talk to their prosecutors inside the office and say, this is how we do it inside this office. I've been there and I've done that. And I think it's important for the district attorney to actually be in the courtroom. My opponent has never gone to trial in the last 8 years since he's been the district attorney. I understand he can't have a full caseload, but himself, his chief deputies, and many others have not even been to trial. And I think a district attorney should lead from the front rather than dictate from behind. I think a district attorney should be in the courtroom, observing his attorneys or her attorneys, being there and just leading from the front. And I also think it's important for the district attorney to have a cohesive unit inside of the office. Right now, we are suffering from a massive turnover, a massive brain drain. When you lose 1 in 4 of your staff in just 2 years, I mean, you are losing so much of the heart and soul of your office. It is very, very difficult to replace a 17-year veteran prosecutor with someone that just came on board. And I think it's important to have a culture that is cohesive, a culture that is energetic and engaged as well. A couple years ago, there was an employee engagement survey that showed that 70% of our office believes that promotions are based on politics. 35% of our office don't believe that management cares about them as individuals. A third of our office didn't agree or agreed. Only a third, only a third agreed that they thought that their values, concerns, and issues were valued by administration. I think what makes a good district attorney is to have a cohesive operation inside, to keep people inside, and to have a management structure that is helpful and hopeful.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you, Sim. What makes a good district attorney?
well, let's start with the idea of truth. Nathan, you've said this multiple times now about 1/4 of the people leaving. So here's what I would say. It is factually incorrect. And
Let's keep the comments down. Go ahead, Sim.
So as I said, how about speaking the truth? Because the data and the information, and I welcome, this is public record, anybody can grandma it tomorrow, okay? What it is that over the last 8 years, Nathan, the attrition rate is 7.76%, okay, for the whole office. I don't know where you got your data, but that is false, it's misleading, and is not truthful. And you should stop saying that, because that's an insult to our voters and it's an insult to our office that has worked really hard. In fact, when you drill down and you go to just attorneys, it's only 6.72%. And that is what the truth is. So maybe that's where you start with what makes a good district attorney is we start by telling the truth. How about... And the other thing is that you need to be personally accountable. I make myself available every Friday to any citizen for whatever issues that they have. As I said, we need to be fiscally conservative. And maybe read our ordinances. The $325,000 that you're talking about for the art, it's actually part of a county ordinance which was approved by a majority of the council. So they're the ones, that's what the rule is. So maybe, that's where the art came from. That's where the money expenditure came from. So in order to be a good district attorney, I think you need to be fiscally conservative, socially responsible, and personally accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone, it's October and we're pretty ramped up. But as you can tell, the candidates are very capable to speak for themselves. So let's let them do that, and let's applaud and hoop and holler between questions, but let's let them have the stage, okay? Nathan, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, I just love the line from Mark Twain, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. Because what we have is that we have actually, the person that actually spoke up here was your HR director, who says that it's a 31% turnover in the last 2 years. Okay? And if we can't trust the HR data, then what can we trust? And secondly, my whole point was never just the numbers. Okay? Whether it's 25% or 20% or 31%, the question and the issue has always been why? Why are people leaving? Why are people leaving in droves? Why are people coming up to me personally and saying, we just can't do this anymore? It's time to now look to other places, okay? It's a toxic work environment. The culture is not good. And by the way, don't take my word for it in case you doubt me. Just ask anyone inside the district attorney's office. And by the way, when it comes to artwork, I understand that is an ordinance, but it's not only just a question of are we going to expend this on this art, but what kind of art that we're going to be spending on? And is it wise to spend on art like that?
Thank you. Sim, 1 minute.
Just no disrespect to my HR person, but those numbers that were presented originally, they were wrong, and she was informed that they were wrong. So you have been relying on a false narrative, and you have made it a central point to go out there and start talking about 1/4 of the people leaving, when the average is 6.72%. People leave to go on to be judges. People leave to go on to the U.S. Attorney's Office. People leave because they move on to different jobs. People leave because they're on probationary terms and they're not performing. People leave because they're retired. That is the complexity of a large office. But if you're going to base it on an untruth, does a disservice to our office. Now, that national average also for law office is 16%, so this is far below that. As far as the art, again, you keep coming back to it. It was a committee, it was an ordinance. That's all it was.
Thank you both. I told you they can both handle the rebuttals. Okay, we're alternating the order of our questions. So, Sim, we'll start this one. What responsibilities does the district attorney have to justice, constitutional rights, and defendants?
That really goes to the heart of the notion of due process and fairness. You know, I've always had a saying that it says that when crime happens, it causes injuries to victims, offenders, and the communities in which crime occurs. Justice, the repairing of all those injuries in a fair and just manner. When we talk about our notion of justice, it's a complex notion. It's just about how we treat victims. How do we address issues of our people who are going through, who have no advocacy? Are we safeguarding their rights in a procedural due process? It is about making sure that we are educating our next generation of attorneys and we respect the constitutional rights of others because we have the authority to file those charges. It is about the full totality of those notions, about how our notion of legitimacy, our notion of integrity, our notion of delivering on the promises of our constitutional law.
Thank you. Nathan.
Thank you.
What responsibilities does the district attorney have to justice, constitutional rights, and defendants?
The responsibility of the district attorney is to make sure that justice happens in each specific case for the community, for the victim, for the defendant, and that justice, in order for that to occur, decisions need to be based on evidence, and evidence alone. Need to be based on justice-based principles as well, not politics. Unfortunately, what has happened is I've been throughout this great county. We've had dozens and dozens of events, and it was eye-opening to me to see what so many of my or potentially constituents have been raising. The idea that this office is engaging in the perception, at least, is political prosecutions. And that is a very, very damaging thing to the public's trust of this office. They bring up cases, and they bring up the timing of these cases. One was against a police officer. It happened in 2012. We filed in June 2014. Two were against former attorneys general. We were investigating that case a year before. We filed in July 2014. We saw the headlines. We all saw the charges, and we saw what happened. Not a single conviction in any of those cases. Now, I'm not saying that what I saw, I wasn't involved in any of those cases, wasn't unsavory, because I think it probably was. But what I am saying is that perception that's out there is quite damaging to the public's trust of this office. So what I believe is that the power of the prosecutor is awesome. Okay, it's something that the community gives us. And what we need to be doing is that we cannot take it lightly. And we have to understand what the community is looking at. With me, I would be a career prosecutor that I've seen everything from traffic tickets to homicides. I'm currently on the homicide team now. And that's what you would have as your next district attorney.
Thank you. Sim, 1 minute rebuttal.
Thank you. Let me just respond. Our job is to try sometimes the difficult cases. Our job is to advocate for a sense of justice for our community. You mentioned those different cases. We don't win every domestic violence case. We don't win every rape case, but that doesn't mean that we don't prosecute the next one. And if there is corruption in an institution, there's malfeasance in an institution, when $4.1 million is spent by our legislature to say that there's a veritable for sale sign hung on the Attorney General's office, it was our obligation, based on the evidence that we had, to fight the good fight, to bring that case forward on behalf of our community. It's the responsibility to show up and try those difficult cases, because that is also the expectation of our community, to do justice.
Thank you. Nathan, 1 minute rebuttal.
I agree. We try tough cases, and you know what? On this stage before you, who has tried the most tough cases, that would be me. I am a career prosecutor. And you know what? When a case like that happens, when there's institutional alleged corruption, you know who needs to be at the front of that and in the courtroom arguing that? The district attorney of Salt Lake County. That's what I would have done. And then finally, I mean, it's not only the timing, but it's the campaign slogan. The campaign slogan was "Nobody's above the law." 4 years ago, charging these people, getting the headlines, getting these charges, and it has created a perception out there that has damaged the public's trust in this office.
Thank you. The next question, Nathan, you will start this one. How should the district attorney's office approach criminal justice reform?
When it comes to criminal justice reform, there's a balance, okay? Every prosecutor would agree that if you can just treat someone that has mental health issues or drug addiction just by giving them treatment, that's what we would want to do, okay? Unfortunately, sometimes it's just not that easy. And so when you institute therapeutic justice, you need to do it in a balanced approach. And we have a track record here, okay? When my opponent first became district attorney, he started a new court program, okay? It sounded really good. Early Case Resolution, ECR, started in 2011, all right? Great name. The idea was to resolve these cases early. And just so you know, 40%, almost 40% of all felony cases and all Class A misdemeanors went into this program. The district attorney's office controlled the valve, who went in and who didn't. In 2013, my opponent was defending this, even though it was failing. 2014, ran on this during his reelection, telling the press it was successful, going well. Well, you know what? The University of Utah issued a final report on this and said it failed miserably. All right? Eventually, the judges had to come in and kill this. And the reason why is because it was a complete disaster. All right? Nearly 60% of all cases that went into this program failed probation. Compared to outside the program, is less than 30. And it wasn't therapeutic. You were four times less likely to go into drug court inside ECR, 5 times less likely to get into mental health court. You were less likely to get drug treatment, all right? And so at the end of the day, the judges killed it. And by the way, you know what the timing was along the same time? Rio Grande. Rio Grande got all out of control around the same very time. Okay, with me, you'll have a career prosecutor, not a career politician, someone that can balance these things. And rather than going in to something that looks nice, we'll have therapeutic justice that actually works.
Thank you, Nathan Evershed. Sim Gill, yes. How should the district attorney's office approach criminal justice reform?
We approach it with research. We approach it with data. We approach it with collaborations. We recognize that there are many other systemic causes that impact it, both in terms of how people are coming in to the criminal justice system. No one can ignore the disproportional criminalization of those in poverty and those of communities of color. So why are they coming in? And then what are we doing with them as they go out? We have to. We helped advocate. I helped create the first mental health court in the state of Utah. We reduced recidivism rates from about 72% down to 19 and 22%. And we did that by changing the paradigm of getting access to medication and therapeutic justice. My colleague mentions ECR, so let me respond to that. The ECR accomplished exactly what it was supposed to do, which was to reduce the amount of time cases were awaiting adjudication. And we always told all the judges and everyone else that that was the first part. You cannot do that if you do not invest in the therapeutic component of that as well. And that was the ECR succeeded at what it was supposed to do. It was not invested in for the continuity of treatment. Operation Rio Grande is example of what is going on. You do law enforcement, you have to couple it with treatment, and then you have to talk about the transition out of there. Therapeutic justice works, folks. Getting access to medication, getting access to mental health services, getting access to the support services will give us better return on the dollars. I have worked with the Criminal Justice Advisory Council for the last 18 years. We have commitment now from both the county, from the city, from the state to this commitment. This model works and is continuing to find success in the lives of many people around in our county.
Thank you. Nathan, 1 minute rebuttal.
Frankly, it's not accurate. If you look at the University of Utah final report, there were 4 goals. One was to resolve cases within 30 days. That was the only goal that they met. The other goal was same justice sooner. It wasn't. They didn't get the same justice sooner. The second thing was, or the third thing was to get treatment. They didn't get the treatment that they were supposed to get. And then finally, it was supposed to reduce recidivism rates. Instead, it skyrocketed from there. It was a complete failure, and it went on for 4 years with thousands and thousands of defendants going through this. And by the way, the first full year that ECR was implemented, the first full calendar year was 2012. When you look at the data with Rio Grande, everything was pretty stable all the way until 2012 when that began to take off. I'm not saying that Rio Grande is that ECR is the sole cause of Rio Grande, but I am saying that you don't understand Rio Grande without understanding ECR.
Thank you. Sim, your response.
Well, again, as I said, early case resolution, we implemented in 2011, a commitment that had already been made by the court prior to that. We helped actualize it. We helped operationalize it for the objective that it was made for. And throughout that, Patrick Anderson, who was with Legal Defenders, we talked and we argued. We said that this is only the first part of it. The continuity of it is dependent on treatment and access to treatment, and that is what we advocated for, and it has taken us a while to get that paradigm shifted as we deliver on that now in application in Operation Rio Grande.
Thank you. Sim will address this question first. Marijuana is in the news a lot. How should the district attorney's office treat marijuana?
Okay. Well, I'm the only district attorney who has publicly come out in support of Proposition 2. And I did so under 3, let me be very specific. 1, I do not support recreational marijuana. 2, I do support a patient's access to medical cannabis. And this is not something that I just came lightly. 4 years ago, I met with the families of these individuals who were suffering from this challenge. I met with a wonderful woman named Desiree, whose son Esteban, who suffers 40 to 50 seizures. And for whatever reason, an access to medical cannabis reduces that down to about 8 or 9 or manageable for her. But there are hundreds of other families who are part of that same challenge. The last thing I want to do is to have a prosecutor stand in between a patient and their suffering and their families. That is not the role of public prosecution. The third reason why I support it is because it's a ballot initiative. And what is a ballot initiative? A ballot initiative is an indictment of the failure of the legislature to respond to the needs of its citizens. And we got here because the legislature turned a deaf ear to that suffering and that plight. And when they had the opportunity to fix it, they did not. So in a participatory democracy, they were given only one option, which was to go through the ballot initiative. And they've gone through this. And I say, let the people vote. Because when they vote, if they vote it down, no harm, no foul. If they vote it up, we will have a special session when we will come out with a balanced approach that's necessary to take care of enforcement as well as the medical needs of patients. Let the people vote.
Thank you, Nathan. How should the district attorney's office treat marijuana?
So when it comes to Prop 2, a couple things. The district attorneys, just enforces the law. We don't create the law. And so whatever happens with Prop 2, that's what will be dealt with, right? And then secondly, I totally agree with Sim. This is an initiative signed over by more than 200,000 people, and it's a failed leadership up on the Hill that didn't address this. And it looks like now it's being addressed. When it comes to Prop 2, what my opinion is on that, and I'll explain, it's kind of nuanced. When it comes to the Prop 2 language itself, I don't agree, okay, because of the language. But if Prop 2 was only about, would you raise your hand if you believe that we should have medical marijuana? I would. I believe that patients should have access to medical marijuana. Unfortunately, it's just not that simple. Because what happens is, in my family, we speak of these people that we've seen, I have that same situation in my family. I have a 2-year-old niece that has seizures, okay, and I've seen this on her. I understand where people are coming from, and the idea that she could have medicine that should be available to her speaks to me. But I'm also a prosecutor, okay, and I see that even though that there are these needs, we also need to understand what's in the law and what the evidence is showing, what law enforcement associations are saying, medical associations and people are saying as well. And when I look at the law itself, I do see some flaws. For example, within the law itself, there is, it would be quite difficult to prosecute someone that's driving a vehicle and killing another person with THC in the driver's system. Because what we would have to prove under Prop 2 is that in the future, this person would not be entitled to a medical cannabis card. And as a prosecutor, how do you disprove the future? So for some of those legal issues that are there, I can't support it, but I do support the idea of having a balanced approach, making sure patients get medical marijuana while we don't increase recreational issues.
Thank you. Sim, your response.
Well, again, I think that the issue here really is about these patients' rights. And look, if we have people who are impaired, we're going to be able to prosecute them even under legal prescriptions that they have. We argue the impairment. And I understand this is not perfect language, but was the only option that was left to our citizens when our legislature failed to pay any attention to them. So the other thing that's interesting on the most recent response from the legislature for me is that Justice Reinvestment declassified third-degree felony possessions of heroin and meth, which I didn't support, which I didn't think was a good idea. And but at the same time, the same legislature wants to criminalize a Class B misdemeanor possession by parents who want to help their parents. So I see some incongruency there. Let the people vote. I think that's what we need to do.
Nathan, your response.
Yeah. Well, I understand that it might not be politically expedient for me to not support this proposition, but I've stated what I've stated. I'm a career prosecutor, okay? I'm not a career politician. The top duty of the district attorney is to the public safety. And by the way, I mean, it looks like there is a balanced approach that's being negotiated out there anyway. So where we can maybe get a solution because of this initiative where we can actually get medical marijuana for patients, but also addressing these concerns that are out there in the language of the proposition. Thank you.
Nathan, we'll take this one first. What should the district attorney's approach be to officer-involved shootings?
I think the district attorney's approach should be the same as it should be in every case. You don't make decisions based off of someone's status, someone's occupation, someone's race, someone's sexual orientation or gender. You make decisions just based off of the evidence, and then you go forward and let the public know what that decision is. You go forward in a way that's thorough, but it's also in a way that's fair, and also in a way that gets people their answers in a good and just way. What I also think is that in going forward, we need to make sure that the public understands what happened and what happened in that situation, that we don't delay terrible amounts of time to see what the answer is. In the last 4 years in the district attorney's office, 13 cases took over 100 days to finally have some kind of resolution. And it's not like the evidence is changing. You have the evidence there, but all the while you have a community that's waiting for an answer, a law enforcement officer that's waiting for an answer, an alleged victim that's waiting for an answer. And I don't think that is very, very efficient. When it comes to the cases that have been charged against the 3 police officers that my opponent is charged, one took 10 months, another one took 10 months, another one took over 18 months. And there's just really no justification for that when the evidence is there before you. If we can file a death penalty case within a month, we should be able to make a decision on what's happening on these cases within about the same time, or maybe just in a few months. And that's what's happening. So my pledge, should I be your district attorney, is that you will have someone that's evaluated these cases, that's taken a look at these cases, and that will make decisions based off of evidence, and that will not be using the evidence before a press conference or something, which has happened with my opponent as he's charged a police officer and used the evidence before the press, which I think was unfair and unconstitutional as well. I will just make sure that the evidence is presented, and we'll go forward and make sure that we do it in the right way.
Thank you. Sim, what should the district attorney's approach be to officer-involved shootings?
This is a very important issue. This is not an issue just important for us in our state or our county. It's an issue that's important in the country. There is the use of force against individuals, unfortunately, has been shrouded too often in secrecy. And this is a challenge. It unfortunately impacts communities of color and communities of poverty disproportionately. And so here's the approach that we've done. We were the first administration that came out and actually published all our reports. We gathered the information, we stated the law, we went through the analysis, and we reached our conclusion, and we published all our reports. We did it, why? Because our community needed to know, because they felt distant and alienated from this process. We also let out and changed the law to create an independent task force. Because the same police officers were investigating their fellow officers in the same agency, which engendered more distrust and alienation from our community. So by us going down and helping change the law, we actually have created an objective independent task force to put some distance between that. Finally, we've also reached out to meet with our community, to meet with them to answer any questions, whether it's Black Lives Matter, Utahns Against Police Brutality, any citizen. They have a right to know. When their citizen is shot and killed in our community, that ought to be a concern for all of us. Now let's keep in mind, we have good men and women who do their job honorably and professionally as law enforcement. And when they do it right, I am the one who's out there defending them and supporting them, even when other people may not. By the same token, the integrity of our decision and our office is when somebody does something wrong, to have the courage to hold them accountable, because that is also the expectation of our community as well.
Thank you. Nathan, your response.
And I would agree with that. It's important to hold people accountable. It's fair. It's what's expected. It's the way our criminal justice system is set up. Unfortunately, what's been happening is that a lot of people have felt that it hasn't been fair. The first time my opponent charged a police officer, he had to dismiss the case at the preliminary hearing. The second time he charged a police officer, it went before a judge who found that there wasn't enough to get beyond the probable cause standard. And the first incident took about 10 months to decide. The second incident took over a year and a half to decide. And again, I mentioned earlier about the timing of it. Lady Justice is blind. The Lady Justice doesn't peek under to see kind of like who is there, who's being prosecuted, who's being charged. It's not politics at all. It's just blind justice going forward, making sure that the decisions are based on the evidence. Do I have time, or was that a phone? Okay, zero. Okay, thank you.
Sim, your response.
If I may. You know, the one case that my opponent keeps talking about, it was a concern that we highlighted what was the challenge when you had the same police officers who were from the same police agency having to be called to testify against their fellow brother officers while a civil litigation was occurring. And that was something that I had highlighted and I pointed out to our law enforcement leadership. I had told them that when a case came like that, there were going to be these kind of complications, and we needed to go through this process to finally lead ourselves to actually creating an independent task force. Now, we file cases when they become ripe. We file cases there, and we file them when we have the evidence. The timing is when the case is right and ready for us to prosecute. And that's what we've done. That's what we will always do. But our issue with officer-involved shootings should be an ongoing conversation, because this is one of the most important conversations for our community to continue to have.
Thank you. Sim Gill will take this question first. How have national conversations on race impacted the role of the district attorney in the criminal justice system?
Again, I think this is a very important question. And when you think about it, look, I don't think we have to be too speculative to realize that we have a race problem in this country. We have a race issue in this country, and especially when it comes to the criminal justice system. And when we think about the application of the law in disproportionate ways to communities of colors, we have a moral obligation and a legal obligation to make sure that doesn't happen. When about 2 to 4% of the people in the state of Utah are African American, but 9% of them are at our state prison, we have a problem, something to be concerned about. When we have 12% of our community is Latino and Hispanic, and 19% of them are in prison, that's something for us to be concerned about. And even when we make our best intentions, justice reinvestment by state reduced by 22% the number of people being referred to our prisons. That's something great to celebrate. Except when we drill down into the data, we also found at the same time it increased by 21.5% those minorities who were being sent to prison at the same time. We have a problem. So these are important issues. And so we need to address them, acknowledge them, and realize that we have an obligation as public prosecutors to make sure that the law is fair, and we address the issues of why people are coming into our criminal justice system and how we need to transition them out so we don't have intergenerational succession of people coming into our criminal justice system. So that's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity for us. I was the first office that opened our offices as a city prosecutor, 21,000 files to examine fair treatment of people who were coming in. And we had disproportionate number of African Americans and minorities coming in, but when they came in, they got a fair process from the Salt Lake City Prosecutor's Office. These are the kind of things that we should open and embrace.
Nathan Evershed, how have national conversations on race impacted the role of the district attorney in the criminal justice system?
Well, the role of the district attorney has been and always should be and always will be about making sure that there's justice for everyone, regardless of someone's race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, or gender. Now, what these conversations have done is that they have raised awareness to some of the issues that are inside the criminal justice system. And so what we need to do to combat some of these issues is that we need to make sure that everyone that comes into the justice system is treated with respect and with dignity. I think another way that we can approach this, a smarter way even, is that we do a really good job at prosecuting in court, right? We're really good at dealing with the evidence and dealing with it in court. But we're also community leaders. I think we should get proximate with the community. I think that we should be engaged with the community. As an example, in Midvale, I was involved with a task force that was trying to keep kids out of gangs. We would meet monthly with other community leaders. These are things that we can do to get proximate with people. I think another thing that we should be able to do inside the district attorney's office to make sure that people have access and resources with our office is that we should have a full-time Spanish interpreter inside the district attorney's office. Right now, we don't have that, which I think is a really big problem for our office. So there are really smart ways that we can do this. We can go upstream. We can help out our friends in law enforcement, get into the schools, do some really smart things, not just go into the courtroom, but go into the schoolroom Go into the other community events and the community centers, so these people and so our friends that are involved in different backgrounds and different socioeconomic status and whatnot, they understand that they can trust us, they can trust the system, they can trust law enforcement, and they can make sure that they have justice for them as well, not just for some.
Thank you. Sam, your response.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree with anything he said about reaching out and doing that. But I think, again, we're sort of glossing over the larger issue here. Why are minorities entering our criminal justice system at a disproportionate rate? Why are they being sentenced to prison at a disproportionate rate? Why are they failing when they come out of there at a disproportionate rate? And those are part of a systemic challenge that we need to be addressing. And that's not going to be handled by us just doing outreach. It's about taking the hard look at the way they're coming in under the conditions, the drivers that are putting them there, and the drivers within the failures of the criminal justice system that is not ensuring their success. This conversation has been long overdue. We really need to address it if we're going to deliver justice for all.
Thank you. Nathan, your response.
And I don't know if I disagree with a lot of what my opponent said, frankly. I think it's okay and fair to have hard discussions with people. We can't solve everything as the district attorney, as prosecutors, but we can play a role. We have to understand that racism has been an issue in this country, okay? And it still is an issue. We have to understand that biases affect all of us, implicit and explicit. So therefore, we need to have honest and fair conversations about all this. But what we can actually do is now go forward, understanding these issues, and look for the hard answers. Sometimes they're not easy, but I think we can do it.
Thank you both. Nathan, you will go first on this question. Describe your position on the death penalty.
My position on the death penalty is that it's something that should be available but seldom used. Up here, inside of our office, we have filed many aggravated murder cases over the years. Okay, my opponent has only filed notice to seek the death penalty on 2 of those cases. I was the prosecutor in both of those cases. Before you, the only one that's actually prosecuted a case that we filed notice to seek the death penalty is me. I have sat across the table from a victim's family. I've seen the yearning in their eyes for justice for that individual. I've been in the courtroom and looked across the table and saw the defendant. And it doesn't matter how evil his acts were or how evil he is. When you look at that and you know that you have some kind of role in determining maybe if he lives or he doesn't, that literally is gut-wrenching. And it's something that doesn't sit very well. And so what you would have with me as a district attorney is someone that's been there and someone that's done that. And it's something I would never, ever take lightly. Now, there is a difference here as well. There's a big reason why a lot of the defense attorneys, particularly my friends in the public defender's office, support me, notwithstanding my stance on the death penalty, which they all oppose, of course. And that is because I believe that we should be using their resources well and wisely. With me as a career prosecutor, you know kind of early on, kind of what the status is. And if the status of the case, even if it's an aggravated murder, we can decide pretty early on whether we're going for the death penalty or not. And all the while, the public defenders are using a lot of their resources building a mitigation case. I will tell you, if I'm district attorney, they will be learning from us early on as to what our decision is likely going to be. That way they don't have to expend their resources, because justice is not a one-way street. Justice is a two-way street. And if we're going to go for the ultimate penalty, that defendant better have the best representation he or she can.
Thank you. Sim Gill, describe your position on the death penalty.
Well, it's a position that you want a district attorney who struggles with the death penalty, not just as cavalier about issuing it out. And I do. In the 2 cases, it was my decision and my decision alone about whether we were going to seek the death penalty or not. I struggled with it. I think that it's a tool that's available. You go to it very seldomly, and you go to it in the most egregious of situations. But it is an issue that has been long overdue. This is not only an issue within our state, but it's also around the country. We need to say, what is the value of the death penalty anymore? Is it deterrence? It doesn't seem to be. Is it because we're going to have safety? Life without the possibility of parole gives us that. And certainly for families for whom another 30 years of appeals is re-traumatizing them through this whole process over and over again. So I think that this is not just something that's on the left, it's also on the right. George Will just recently talked about how the time has maybe come for us to reassess that, and I agree with that, that we need to maybe have this hard conversation. And we're going to have it at the legislature, and we should revisit that. I think that we need to get away from all the different aggravators that we do have, and maybe if we are going to have it, reduce it down to 4. I think that penalty intuitively is appropriate for when somebody who's on life without the possibility of parole kills another person, when you kill police officers in the line of duty, when you engage in mass deaths and multiple deaths, and when you abduct and sexually abuse and kill children in the commission of that crime. I think people understand that. But rather than all the totality we have, I think we need to have this conversation. This conversation is long due. I struggle with the death penalty.
Nathan, your response.
Well, I think it's also important to remember at a time like this that my opponent's been the district attorney for 8 years. And that changing the aggravators and dealing with those issues, some of that I very much agree with. I think that there are some aggravators, many aggravators, frankly, that shouldn't even be on the books. We need to brush off the death penalty statute, bring it up to 2018, up to what the current standards are. But let me just tell you, it has been the standard of the district attorney's office for decades that when it comes to a death penalty case, it's a very, very high bar. This is even before my opponent. This is with other district attorneys as well. Should I be your district attorney, it will remain a high bar. It is something I will never take lightly. After having been in the courtroom, been with those victims, seen what I've seen, felt what I felt, it's something that will be weighed and measured with a lot of caution. Thank you.
Thank you. Sam, your response.
Well, I think we're probably about as close to an agreement on an issue that I think we recognize that
Should we shake hands?
Yeah, we can shake hands. There you go. And it is, I just think that we need to revisit. Look, we used to impose the death penalty because we were worried that the killer was not going to be held accountable when we lived in villages. Life without the possibility of parole eliminates that. And we need to recognize the costs that are attendant with that and also the cost that it imposes. I've met with the individual families about when we had asked for the death penalty and when we were not asking for the death penalty and those conversations that we've had. And those are case-by-case, heart-wrenching conversations. But what I would say that this issue is something that's been long overdue, and in a civilized society, this is something we need to visit with some great urgency. Thank you.
Thank you both. Sim goes first on this one, and the question is, what have you done, that would be for Sim, or what will you do, that would be for Nathan, about the issue of mass incarceration?
Well, this is an important question, and this one that's near and dear to me. I think that we are a country that jails more human beings than any other country in the world. We're number one, and that is not something to be proud of. And we need to recognize that we went from spending about $6 to $7 billion a year in the mid-1980s to over $72 billion a year now to prop up our incarceration state. And when you look nationally, what do we get for all that investment? 2/3 of the people will be behind bars within 36 months of their release. So we're not even getting a return on investment for why we're spending all this money. So what we need to do is we need to address that issue to going back to the core causes here. We need to peel out the people who don't belong in our criminal justice system. We need to stop criminalizing addictions and stop criminalizing mental illness, and we need to start giving them options for treatment so we can remove them out of there. We need to recognize that we're on a trajectory of bankruptcy. We can, if you build 4,000 jail beds, we could fill them. If you give us 5,000 jail beds, we could fill them. So working in partnership with our sheriffs and Sheriff Rivera, we've talked about a potential of creating a community correction center where we could, through treatment, transition people out to get them out of the criminal justice system faster. We need to address the issue of root causes of why they're coming there. Poverty, homelessness, lack of jobs, education. And we have a moral obligation from policy perspective to address those causes so they're not finding themselves and ending up in our criminal justice system. So mass incarceration continues to be a huge problem, but it's driven to some extent by the failures that we have in our procedures and how we're putting people there, and then our failures on the back end when we're not helping them transition out.
Thank you. Nathan, I will read you the question the same way. What have you done or what will you do about the issue of mass incarceration?
Yeah. I think a lot of this issue is dealing with our federal partners. One really neat thing that we do in Utah is we have determinate sentencing, which gives judges a lot of discretion, the Board of Pardons a lot of discretion as well. So it's a good model that we have. And I agree it's an issue that we should always look at and address. And it's something that we actually tried to address back in 2015 when the legislature started a new initiative called the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, JRI. And again, it's another one of those things like early case resolution. It sounds really good, okay? And it has a good name as well. But when we implement new changes, we need to do it in a judicious and wise way. Because what happened on that is that while the reforms were good and noble, the funding on the back end was insufficient. And then we saw how that impacted the community, and we saw how that impacted our crime rates as well. So what we've been seeing then in the last 8 years are two initiatives that sounded really good, and it goes to like these big issues and whatnot, but both of them didn't work out the way that the public expected. And what we need to do is now, rather than just having words and rhetoric and nice things, we need to make sure that we do it the right way. With me, it's just not about reading and what's been out there. I've been in the courtroom these last nearly 11 years. I know what works. I've seen what works. I know that when we need to be tough, we need to be tough. And I know that we always need to be fair. And when new ideas, new approaches come up, I'll always remember that my first obligation is, yes, to public safety. But we also need to be smart. We also need to make sure that we have the funding and the programs and the abilities that are there within our community to make sure that we go about this in a balanced approach, recognizing the public safety needs, but also recognizing the therapeutic needs that are there.
Thank you. Sim, your response.
So this is why you need a district attorney with a broader vision. Veterans court, drug court, mental health court, different medically assisted treatment in jail, building of a community correction center. All of these are things that we can actually do, things that I participated and supported, working with partners to address. And you know, this is why when my colleague says he likes to be in the courtroom and doesn't want to discuss politics, let me tell you, I'm as a DA, come out publicly said we need to do full Medicaid expansion. And the reason we need to do full Medicaid expansion is because 60 to 65% of our people in our county jail on any given day could benefit directly from 138% of poverty if we did full Medicaid expansion. Yes, JRI failed in some respects because we tied it to full Medicaid expansion and the legislature did not go through on it. They didn't deliver on that. But that's not because the idea isn't sound, not because the research isn't there, and not because it's giving us the results that we all want.
Nathan, your response.
Yeah. So again, we're going back to this idea of rhetoric versus record. Okay? We've explored and fully examined the issue of early case resolution. All right? It sounded really, really good. It was our office and our office alone that was controlling a lot of those mechanisms. We controlled who went in and who went out. And after 4 years, even though it was a good idea, okay, who doesn't like resolving a case early? But the problem is that if you go after those big ideas and you do it in a way that's not deliberate, that's not focused, okay, that ends up to be a complete failure, and you see how that impacts our community greatly. And we all experience that. And so when it comes to JRI, again, under his watch, there should have been a conversation. Legislature, this is a good idea. But you know what? This will not work the way you think it will without funding. And it's better to not just go forward with a big idea without the adequate funding than, than avoiding the disastrous consequences that will happen, which is what we've seen.
Thank you both. I would like to thank you for some robust debate before we get to our final question, which both candidates agreed would be an appropriate final question. We start with Nathan. How is the District Attorney's Office presently serving the people of Salt Lake County?
So I've been there for nearly 11 years. I spoke in my opening as to what we've been seeing. Massive turnover, the perception of politics that's been out there. Again, you can ask anyone inside the criminal justice system. Defense attorney, prosecutor, retired judge, people that work in the courts, and just ask them, okay? Now, another issue is how this has been impacting key segments within our office. When my opponent first took over this office, his predecessor was a female. And a lot of her key leaders were also female. She had new teams, like the domestic violence team, totally disbanded it. For 4 years, our domestic violence team was disbanded, causing a massive problem to domestic violence victims, all right? And so what's been happening recently is that what we've been seeing inside of the office with conversations with me and with the stats that we've seen is that when he took over the administration of the district attorney's office, 5 of the administrators were women, or 5 were team leaders. Right now, of the 12 team leaders on the criminal side, only 2 are. And this has caused a big problem with the women in our office. Of the teams that get onto career paths, there are 20 attorneys on those teams. Only 4 or 5 of them are women. On our juvenile team, 7 of the 9 are. With me as your district attorney, what I will do and commit to is to make sure that the women in our office have a voice, that they have an opportunity for promotion, that they will have leadership. When 40% of our office are women, we're going to make sure that they have their voices and that they have a future inside of our office.
Thank you. Sim Gill, how is the District Attorney's Office presently serving the people of Salt Lake County?
So did I hear you correctly that 40% of the attorneys are women? Is that what you said?
That's my understanding.
That's right. And those women are there because for the last 8 years we've been hiring women. That's why they're there. Okay? And also because when it came to leadership, my administration is the first one that has promoted more female team leaders. We have also promoted more assistant division administrators as females, and we also promoted the first division administrator as a female, I believe, in the history of our office. So those are all good things that we've done for women. Okay? Now, as far as how are we serving presently, we're fiscally sound. We're on a sound footing. We have increased our technology. We're preparing for the next 25 years. There's going to be 1 million more people there. And how do we prepare ourselves to meet that challenge? We have created the homicide team that my colleague is so proud of. I created that. He's on there. I put him on there. The major crimes unit, the family protection unit. We have created these different new teams. The major crimes unit is where we make the investment on our new coming attorneys who are raising the bar of professionalism because we're putting a higher level of expectation and performance on them. We've reached out to outside partners. We've let out on trainings. We just hosted the first national conference on prosecution excellence and best practices for the country as a whole. We are partnered up and brought in the Children's Justice Center into our office. We brought the city prosecutor's office into the office. We continue to work on Operation Rio Grande to address the issues of enforcement and treatment and continuity of care post adjudication and sentence. We're working with CCJJ and the Criminal Justice Advisory Council on new innovations on how we can make a better impact in our community and in the criminal justice system. The District Attorney's Office is doing a great job serving its community presently.
Thank you. Nathan, your response.
So there were 5 team leaders when he took over the District Attorney's Office, which were women. Right now there are 2. On the criminal justice side, there are 12 team leaders. 2 of them are women. That is 16% of our office. Again, of the teams that offer promotions, only 4 of the 20 are women. On the juvenile team, 7 of the 9 are. What I will do is I will change the culture. A culture that is not that is merit-based, okay, not based on politics. All right, something that promotes a culture that encourages, and we can just do better. At the end of the day, this is why I'm running for district attorney. This office can just be better. There are different ideas, different approaches to different leadership styles, but I just believe that when it comes down to the district attorney himself or herself in the future, that it's best to have a career prosecutor. It's best for it to be about justice, not politics.
Thank you. Sim, your response.
Well, Nathan, I hate to break it to you. You're running for a political office, okay? Because it is a large office. It has complex issues. We have to have partnerships with other electeds. You cannot get a budget passed if you do not have those conversations with policymakers. You cannot get raises and benefits for our people if you don't have those conversations. You certainly can't get buildings built, which have been a dream for 30 years, if you don't have those conversations, which makes our life better as an office. It's about making sure that our needs are met, our future is prepared. So yes, it is a political office because it is a big job. It requires to go outside of the courtroom and look at the challenges of keeping people employed with the right kind of benefits, with the right kinds of compensation, moving in the right direction. So welcome, my friend. It's a political office.
Thank you, both candidates. That was a robust debate. Now we would like to hear closing statements. We will start with Sim Gill.
Thank you.
And again, you can do it up here or there.
I can do it from here. That's fine. Thank you, ABU, ACLU. Steve, thank you. Thank you, Nathan. And thank you for all of you for coming here. I love this office and respect the privilege it gives to serve our community and the responsibility it demands in leadership from those who would step up to it. Sometimes I've said that the best public policy education I ever received was that I was born in another country. I witnessed poverty. I know what injustice does to the soul and dignity of a person. I know what corruption in government and institutions of power does to a community and its citizens. When my family emigrated here, like all other immigrants, we were drawn here by the ideals of justice, equality, fairness, and truth. I have never forgotten my experiences, nor those ideals. I think about them daily as your district attorney. Yet, the promise and the hopes of our ideals are not always available to the community of our citizens or those on the margins of power, or those who feel cynical about public institutions and public service. I believe in the inherent goodness of people, and I believe in the inherent goodness of our institutions to be a positive change in our community. When it comes to criminal justice, my hypothesis has been that when public policy makers fail to address the issues of social justice, economic justice, education, public health, these public policy deficits manifest as crises in our community, and historically we have relied heavily upon our criminal justice system as our crisis managers. In application, this crisis management has disproportionately impacted communities of color and poverty, resulting in costs that cannot be sustained and perpetuating injustices we cannot ignore, and without giving us the outcomes that we had hoped for. This, then, is our challenge. How do we ensure public safety, reduce recidivism in a fair, proportionate, just, and fiscally smart way that engenders trust and confidence from our community for the ideals we all hold? As a prosecutor for more than 23 years, I've advocated for smart prosecution over zero tolerance, therapeutic justice over incarceration where appropriate, and jailing those who are a risk to our community than merely those suffering from disease of addiction and mental illness. As we look to the future, I know we will have another 1 million people over the next 30 years in Salt Lake County. We have built a 40-year footprint by building our new building that will save taxpayers $13.1 million over the next 25 years. We have also positioned ourselves over the same time to bring in an additional almost $20 million in new revenue. We have invested in the next generation of attorneys with invested training, expectations, and accountability, who are already raising the bar of experience as trial attorneys. We continue to build partnerships to advocate for the expanding capacity for treatment, whether it is in mental health or addiction. I've advocated for full Medicaid expansion to 138% of the poverty level because some 60 to 65% of people sitting in jail would benefit from access to treatment. I support medically assisted treatment in our jails, the Community Correction Center. I'm exploring with Habitat for Humanity and private developers about the possibility of expanding our affordable housing stock to support the trajectory of success for those transitioning from addictions and our jails. We are committed to eliminating the inequality of cash bail that impacts the poor and fails to address the risk. We must continue to gather data from Operation Rio Grande, the new jail dashboard, to make informed decisions. Finally, we can no longer ignore the need for meaningful juvenile reform that both protects our community and addresses the needs of the offenders. We are exploring new options to provide direct clinical support to victims of trauma as their cases move through our adjudications. Next year, our goal is to launch a Camp Hope that will provide support to children who have been traumatized and the hope of possibility of having a childhood again. Fiscally conservative, socially responsible, personally accountable, this office belongs to you. If this vision is consistent with your ideals, then I humbly ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Nathan Evershed.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you to the ACLU, to the ABU, to Steve, to Sim. My thought during this debate was, I'm glad I didn't do estate planning, because I wouldn't have had an opportunity like this to get involved in the community, to get involved in an important office. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close the only way I know how, and that's as a trial attorney. So let's talk about the evidence. Not the rhetoric, but the evidence. Because we've heard a lot of rhetoric, and that's nice, of course, but it's also important to focus on the record. And the evidence has shown that more than 25% of the district attorney's office has left in 2 years because of the toxic culture inside of the office. The losses of these trained attorneys and staff is a huge cost to taxpayers, and it erodes the trust of the office. The evidence has shown that high-profile case after high-profile case, generating serious charges and banner headlines, but no convictions. And this costs taxpayers in more ways than one. We've presented evidence of a broken relationship with law enforcement agencies. They have lost trust in this office. And that is why I have the endorsement of every single law enforcement association in the county. We've shared evidence of a failed court program, one that sounded good up front, but has proven a major failure, leaving our communities less safe. Finally, we have shown evidence of a broad coalition within the justice system. Police, retired judges, fellow prosecutors, many defense attorneys as well, who support my candidacy. They know me. They know that I'm tough, but I'm also always fair. This speaks to the difference between a career prosecutor and a career politician. It speaks to my long accomplishments inside the courtroom and my concern that all receive justice, accused and victim alike. Let me share one of those statements. Let me share from one of those supporters. This is from Judge Bruce Lubeck, who retired this year. For 30 years, he was either a defense attorney or a prosecutor, before spending 17 years on the bench, where he had seen everything in the justice system, seen it inside and out. he said about the district attorney's office, quote, "The office which Mr. Evershed seeks has seen, in my experience, a steady and consistent decline in morale and effectiveness in recent years," close quote. You've heard a lot tonight, and I would just ask that you just ask. Just ask people inside the criminal justice system what has happened to the district attorney's office. We thank Mr. Gill for his 8 years of service, but 8 years is enough. It is time for a new leader and a new direction to restore the district attorney's office to full strength. 8 years ago, when Mr. Gill was running for district attorney, he stated that a district attorney needs bipartisan support from law enforcement, and felony experience. I agree with that standard. And by that standard, I am the most prepared and qualified to be your next district attorney. I ask for your vote of justice over politics. I ask that you vote for me as your next district attorney. Thank you.
We're not quite done. I would like to thank the ABU Education Fund and the ACO of Utah's Campaign for Smart Justice. I would like to express gratitude to the University of Utah and Ray Quinney Law School for hosting this event. I'd like to thank both candidates for a fantastic event and for our capacity crowd. Everyone go vote. Wow.